Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this evening. Thank you for the rain today. And uh, we just thank you for all your blessings. We ask that you give us ears to hear, eyes to see, understanding and wisdom into your word, Father. We thank you for all that you do for us, all your blessings, all your mercy and grace. In Yeshua's name, amen.
Amen. I'm
So,
thankful I'm indoors and not out in that wind and rain.
who's not?
I'm thankful that I'm indoors and not out in that wind and rain.
Oh, yeah. It's kind of blowing too. So we are in Exodus 7, verse 14, starting with the first plague. And as you all probably know, there are 10 plagues in total. And the first plague is the water turned into blood. Verse 14, then Yahuwah said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. And this is the hardened, his heart is heavy, Ebed. Go to Pharaoh in the morning as he is going out to the water. Stand on the bank of the Nile to meet him, and take in your hand the staff that turned into a serpent. And you shall say to him, Yahuwah the Elohim of the Hebrews sent me to you, saying, Let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness. But so far you have not obeyed. Thus says Yahuwah, by this you shall know that I am Yahuwah. Behold, with the staff that is in my hand, I will strike the water that is in the Nile, and it shall turn into blood. The fish in the Nile shall die, and the Nile will stink, and the Egyptians will grow weary of drinking water from the Nile. I would imagine you would grow pretty weary of drinking that water pretty quick. And Yahuwah said to Moses, say to Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over their rivers, their canals, and their ponds, and all their pools of water, so that they may become blood, and there shall be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, even in vessels of wood and in vessels of stone. So it wasn't just bodies of water, it was any water that they had, hi Deborah, that they had in their jars or, uh, you know, whatever. Moses and Aaron did as Yahweh commanded in the sight of Pharaoh, in the sight of his servants. He lifted up the staff and struck the water in the Nile, and all the water in the Nile turned into blood. And fish in the Nile died, and the Nile stank, so that the Egyptians could not drink water from the Nile. There was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. But the magicians of Egypt did the same by their secret arts. So Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and in this case, his heart was made strong. Hazek. And he would not listen to them, as Yahuwah had said. Pharaoh turned and went into his house, and he did not take even this to heart. And all the Egyptians dug along the Nile for water to drink, for they could not drink the water of the Nile. 7 full days passed after Yahuwah had struck the Nile. So if you could imagine, like if the Salt River just turned to blood, and then all our, you know, every water source that we have was nothing but blood. You go to take a shower and it's just blood squirting out of your shower head. I mean, that would be pretty upsetting, I would imagine. I mean, it would tend to ruin your day. But Pharaoh, it's just like, I don't care. He doesn't even take this to heart. He just like goes in his house and says, whatever. Uh, so then 7 days, now the whole scenario of these plagues would take place in the I would say in the space of 5 months. Do you have a question mark or go ahead?
I was just going to say, do you think that people, let's just say there's a distance, people that were in surrounding areas, maybe even Ethiopia, that heard about it
Yeah,
and were in such disbelief, do you think people might have trekked to see if it was really true, just to come and see?
yeah. So the water in the Nile is flowing, it flows north into the Mediterranean. Uh, was was the water just, I wonder where it started, the blood started, and is it just dumping into the Mediterranean Sea?
Yeah, there could have been people from Saudi Arabia that were coming over to see, people from the Sinai Peninsula. There could have even been, like you said, the Ethiopians. It's coming from them going north. But if it was clear where they were at, and they're thinking, "What? It's red. Come on, let's go see." I don't. You
Yeah,
would think something that's so extraordinary, hard to even believe, but yet the reports are coming just sound,
yeah,
like concrete testimony. You might be compelled to go. I'm not saying a guy with a big family, but some may have made a trek to go see if it was true.
yeah. So this
Again,
whole all the plagues uh, took place in the space of 5 months, which is uh, because I think when they first wanted to go, he tells Pharaoh, "We just want to go out 3 days into the wilderness and have a festival." I'm thinking that was around the time of the Sukkot, and between Sukkot and the Passover is about 5 months. So all these plagues take place in wintertime, first of all, between the time of Sukkot and Passover. And so after this first plague, it says 7 full days passed after Yahweh had struck the Nile. Uh, so I don't think each plague, maybe they were spaced out uh, within that 5 months. I don't know. Well, 7 days passed before the next plague. Do you think maybe a time period, how long would a plague last? Like a couple days maybe, and then a week or so between plagues? Uh, that's what I'm thinking. Any thoughts on that? Okay. Uh, Chapter 8, the second plague, frogs.
Polly wants to make a comment about the
Oh,
blood.
go ahead, Polly.
What was his last question that he just asked?
Well, he was talking about the duration
Pining.
of the plague, and then 7 days elapsed after the plague had ended. So that's what he's saying. He said,
The
"Hello."
next one began. That's what he
Yeah,
said.
he's thinking 5 months of length between the first plague and the last. So that's the 150 days of the whole flood thing. So yeah,
Yeah, also in Revelation, there's the 5 months of when those things come out of the ground, out of the pit, and torture people for 5 months.
yeah.
So it's kind of a theme throughout, like you say, the flood also, 5 months.
So what you're saying is God does things the same way.
Yeah, you could say that.
The
Oh,
two comments that I have is that it's interesting that this is taking place between Sukkot and Passover,
uh-huh.
because we always see in the cycle of sanctification that is the time that if there's anything that has to be dealt with, or
Hmm.
maybe we just see a lot of things that
Things come up.
things come
Yeah,
up during this time that have to be dealt with, or
Yeah.
yeah,
cleaned. It's just interesting that the plagues come during this time, but it's just like we got to remove the leaven.
Yeah.
This is things that cause the leaven to come up.
Yeah. The end result is getting the leaven out for
Yes.
Passover.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
the thing I want to comment about, and I'm sorry, I don't have my scripture open right now. and I'm sitting opposite of Mark, so hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yeah, here you
I
good.
need to move, I
She's
can.
behind you.
Yeah. It was interesting when I was reading through the covenant books. And when I got to the salt covenant book and I began to see the resemblance of salt and blood and how salt and blood are very much connected, that I wanted to go back and look at these scriptures concerning the Nile turning to blood. And I wondered if it could be that the Nile turned to salt, that it just was not, I have to see, does it say red? Does it use the word red
Well,
in description?
so blood, and I think that the blood has a high level of salinity in it.
Well, blood is because blood, yes, it's very salty. That's why sometimes the consumption of blood when an animal will consume, it's very high content of salt. So not only, so I'm saying the correlation is not only, it's chemically correlated as well. So could it be, does it say that it's red, or does it say it turned to blood, which could mean that it just turned to salt water?
Yeah. Well, they're very similar words, blood and red in Hebrew.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about that, if it was blood or salt, it would be really amazing if they were to dig down into the layers of the banks and see if they found a layer of salt back in history. That would be a really interesting, I hadn't thought of that, but that could be a real tell, because it should be there in the layers of sediment that's built up over time.
Yeah.
Something should be there. Yeah.
Hey, Paul's on.
Say, oh, hi, Brian.
Heard, who was that? Brian?
Oh, I answered my speaker.
Brian, do you have a comment? Or you just
Oh no, I was just gonna say
your microphone's on. So in this first plague, also you notice that it's Aaron is the one who is manning the staff at this point. And I think he does that for the first three, and after that Moses takes over. So we can go on to the second plague, the frogs. Chapter 8, verse 1, Then Yahuwah said to Moses, Go into Pharaoh and say to him, Thus says Yahuwah, Let my people go, that they may serve me. But if you refuse to let them go, behold, I will plague all your country with frogs. The Nile shall swarm with frogs that shall come up into your house and into your bedroom and on your bed and in the houses of your servants and your people, and into your ovens and your kneading bowls. I was thinking, actually, you have all this bloody water, and next thing on the list is frogs. I wonder how much, if 7 days was enough time for the water to, because that would be a real miracle, getting all these frogs from blood water.
I wonder if this was blood or salt, whatever it was, maybe that salinity caused them to come up. This is part of the reason they had to get out of that, because the salinity was just, they couldn't bear it. They had to get out of it. So everything that's setting in the ground, waiting, has got to get out of the ground. It's just sitting there waiting for rain. But now, no more hibernation. It's time to get out.
So there are a couple, there is one god, I guess it's a goddess, Heket. It looks like a frog. Is that the one, Ward, perchance?
What was it? What was that again?
A frog that looks like, or the god or goddess that looks like a frog, would that be Heket?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head.
I think it's Keck.
Heket?
I might check at the frog.
Yeah, that's one. Happy is the other one.
Happy?
And I tell you, if
Happy the
just
frog?
for a quick funny story, I live in a town that is so ridiculous. If I could turn my computer, there's literally giant frogs all over this town. And they look at me all day long. And, I think about Revelations where the frogs come out of the dragon's mouth. And I'm like, not today, Happy. It ain't happening. But literally, there is one right across the street. And they're huge. The town was called Frog Level back in the 1800s. And they literally have it's idol worship at its finest.
You mean they're like statues?
Yes, absolutely. I'll take pictures and send it to you.
Oh.
It's unbelievable. Unbelievable.
There is a
Unbelievable.
there is a statue of a frog in downtown Mesa. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it on Main Street there. That is,
What is the purpose? I mean,
I have no idea. I mean, this
it's
is a
just
Mormon
insane.
town, and
Yeah.
who knows what Mormons are.
They're putting a lot of artwork up. So there's statues of people sitting on benches and all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I think that, I know Keck was one of the frogs, and then
Yeah.
Happy is the other for in Revelations. But
And
I can
whatever
remember.
that thing is, I think of it. It's a current thing that's been going on. I forget. There's a frog image of this. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about. Ward probably does, but I can't think of the name of the thing. It had to do with something with Trump or something. You know what I'm talking about, Ward?
Yeah, that was Keck.
Keck, okay.
Yeah,
That is the
that's
name of
with
one of their
yeah,
gods.
yeah, yeah. Same thing. That's what I meant. Thanks, Ward.
Okay. Well, let's go on to where did I leave off here? Verse 4. The frog shall come up on you and on your people and on all your servants. And Yahuwah said to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the rivers, over the canals, and over the pools, and make frogs come up on the land of Egypt. So Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. But the magicians did the same by their secret arts. They made frogs come up on the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, plead with Yahuwah to take away the frogs from me and from my people. I will let the people go to sacrifice to Yahuwah. Moses said to Pharaoh, be pleased to command me when I am to plead for you and for your servants and for your people, that the frogs be cut off from you and your house and be left only in the Nile. And he said, tomorrow. I would have probably told him, well, how about now? But Moses said, be as you say, so that you may know that there is no one like Yahuwah our Elohim. The frogs shall go away from you and your house and your servants and your people. They shall be left only in the Nile. So Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried to Yahuwah about the frogs, as he had agreed with Pharaoh. You notice that Moses always keeps his word. And Yahuwah did according to the word of Moses. The frogs died out in the houses, the courtyards, and the fields, and they gathered them together in heaps, and the land stank. But when Pharaoh saw that there was a respite, he hardened his heart. In this case, his heart became heavy, and he would not listen to him as Yahuwah had said. So Pharaoh, on the other hand, he's a man not of his word.
Yeah, that wouldn't smell too good if you had that many frogs where it was just covering the land all
Yeah.
at once, and then the putrefaction of that in combination with what was coming from the blood in the water. This would be, and people are going to want to clean. If you've got stuff dying around your house or your dwelling,
Yeah.
you're going to want to clean it off, but you don't really have any water. You're going to have to use the blood to clean it off.
Yeah. Would have been a big mess, that's for sure. Third plague is the gnats. I know there's some translations say lice. Then Yahuwah said to Moses, say to Aaron, stretch out your staff and strike the dust of the earth, so that it may become gnats in all the land of Egypt. And they did so. Aaron stretched out his hand with his staff, It struck the dust of the earth, and there were gnats on man and beast. And all the dust of the earth became gnats in all the land of Egypt. The magicians tried by their secret arts to produce gnats, but they could not. So they could replicate the first two plagues, and now they can't do this.
I find it interesting that even though the magicians duplicated the frogs, they weren't able to make them go away, and they had to entreat Moses to get the frogs to be removed. So even though they copied the bringing them in, they could not get them to go away.
Yeah. And the magician said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." So by now, these magicians are starting to become, like, hey, maybe we should just let them go because this is the finger of God. And there's something here, something happening here that's bigger than us. And we'll see later how, later in the story, actually, the servants of Pharaoh, uh, they actually esteem Moses. So when you just think of the finger of God, finger of Elohim, uh, that's just a small portion of the strength he has. Usually, when you think of the strength of Yahuwah, it's the arm of Yahuwah where his strength is. In this case, he's just like his finger. Uh, the stone tablets were etched by the finger of Elohim. So it's that kind of like precise power that he has. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Go ahead.
One of the commentaries say that these are small little gnat things that bite and cause irritation on the skin. So it would have been really,
Yeah,
really, really irritating.
probably maybe was lice, because lice are a little more irritating, even though gnats are pretty irritating. They don't really bite you though, do they? But Pharaoh's heart was hardened. His heart was made strong, and he would not listen to them as Yahuwah had said. The fourth plague is flies. Verse 20. Then Yahuwah said to Moses, "Rise up early in the morning and present yourself to Pharaoh as he goes out to the water, and say to him, Thus says Yahuwah, let my people go that they may serve me. Or else, if you will not let my people go, behold, I will send swarms of flies on you and your servants and your people, and into your houses, and the houses of the Egyptians shall be filled with swarms of flies, and also the ground on which they stand. But on that day I will set apart the land of Goshen, where my people dwell, so that no swarms of flies shall be there, that you may know that I am Yahuwah in the midst of the earth. Thus I will put a division between my people and your people. Tomorrow this sign shall happen."
So this commentary says, well, Septuagint calls it the dog fly. Apparently, according to Philo, who comments on it, says that this was a severe scourge that much more annoying than the gnats. They attach themselves, especially to the body, especially the edges of the eyelids, and become a dreadful plague. So that would be
Oh, yeah.
that would be pretty rough.
Deborah just sent me a text. She said they lost her internet. They're having a big rainstorm right now. So she's not there. Quit
It's
raining. Yeah.
interesting that the Septuagint is saying it's a dog fly, considering that I've made a connection between the word dog and dragons.
Yeah.
Oh,
Interesting.
is a dog fly maybe like a horse fly, a big old fly or something?
Well,
No.
when you think about these Elohim beings, these gods of Egypt, as being, if
Yeah.
there's seraphim, they're connected with dragons, and every one of these plagues is against one of the gods.
Yeah.
So it all kind of ties together.
Yeah. verse 23. Then thus I will put a division, verse 24. And Yahuwah did so. There came great swarms of flies into the house of Pharaoh and into his servants' houses. Throughout all the land of Egypt, the land was ruined by swarms of flies. Then Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, Go, sacrifice to your God within the land. But Moses said, so he's telling him, you now you can sacrifice, but you're going to have to do it here. But Moses said, it would not be right to do so, for the offerings that we shall sacrifice to Yahuwah our Elohim are an abomination to the Egyptians. Remember how the Egyptians, they didn't like shepherds. And I see Paul has a hand up, so go ahead, Paul.
So one of the interesting things is that there is a separation or a distinction made between the Mitzrayim and the land of Goshen.
Mhm.
If you go back to the fourth day of creation, there is a separation between light and darkness. And so I just found that connection. I don't know if
Oh,
it's relevant, don't know, but let's see, on the fourth day, what does it say? Fourth day, sun, moon, and stars. And then it says in verse 16, Bereshit, and he put the sky to rule over the day and over the night, and they separated the light from the darkness. And Elohim saw that this was good. There was evening and there was morning the fourth day. So, you know, maybe there's a connection because now he's separating
yeah,
them. Don't know.
that's a good point. So the first three plagues happened throughout the land, even in the land of Goshen. And now he is starting the separation where none of the remaining plagues will happen in the land of Goshen, except possibly the last one, because for that plague, you had to perform a certain work in order for it not to affect you. But we'll get there. Then Pharaoh called Moses and Aaron and said, Go sacrifice your God within the land. So he wants them to stay. He doesn't want them to leave. He said, You can sacrifice, but do it here. But Moses said, It would not be right to do so, for the offerings we shall sacrifice to Yahuwah our Elohim are an abomination to the Egyptians. If we sacrifice offerings abominable to the Egyptians before their eyes, will they not stone us? We must go 3 days' journey into the wilderness and sacrifice to Yahuwah our Elohim, as he tells us. So Pharaoh said, I will let you go to sacrifice to Yahuwah your Elohim in the wilderness. Only you must not go very far away. Plead for me. Then Moses said, Behold, I am going out from you, and I will plead with Yahuwah that the swarms of flies may depart from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people tomorrow. Only let not Pharaoh cheat again by not letting the people go to sacrifice to Yahuwah. So Moses went out from Pharaoh and prayed to Yahuwah, and Yahuwah did as Moses asked and removed the swarms of flies from Pharaoh, from his servants, and from his people. Not one remained. But Pharaoh hardened his heart this time also, and did not let the people go.
So it's kind of funny if there is a correlation with the dog fly.
Uh-huh.
They're asking Moses to get rid of the dog flies. So
Yeah.
get these things out of here. We don't want those things here anymore.
Don't they have another god that kind of looks like a dog, or I guess it would be a jackal. I don't remember which one that was.
Yeah, they do have it's a dog god. Yep, they do. I think it's Anubis off the top of my head.
Oh, okay, yeah. I have a bunch of them written down here.
But they actually have a number of those dog-headed type gods.
Yeah. So up till now, let's see, the fourth plague, that was the first plague that there's a division between the people of Israel and Egypt. And I think it's also the first time that Moses actually makes the command. Or he tells them what will happen, and then it takes place the next day. So chapter 9, verse 1, the fifth plague, the livestock, the Egyptians' livestock dies. Then Yahuwah said to Moses, go into Pharaoh and say to him, thus says Yahuwah, the God of the Hebrews, let my people go, that they may serve me. For if you refuse to let them go and still hold them, behold, the hand of Yahuwah will fall with a very severe plague upon your livestock that are in the field, the horses, the donkeys, the camels, the herds, and the flocks. But Yahuwah will make a distinction between the livestock of Israel and the livestock of Egypt, so that nothing of all that belongs to the people of Israel shall die. And Yahuwah set a time, saying, tomorrow Yahuwah will do this thing in the land. And the next day Yahuwah did this thing. All the livestock of the Egyptians died, but not one of the livestock of the people of Israel died. And Pharaoh sent, and behold, not one of the livestock of Israel was dead. But the heart of Pharaoh was hardened. His heart was heavy, and he did not let the people go.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. In the Septuagint, it says on the animals, it calls it a very great death.
Oh,
Now we had the stench of frogs putrefying all over the ground. Now they're going to have all of the animals dying on the ground. And I mean, the stench is mounting.
yeah.
So the cattle and the livestock dying, that god is Hathor.
Hathor,
There's a
okay.
lot of connections with Hathor. I mean, the Great
Oh, yeah.
Chicago Fire is connected to Hathor because the story of Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over the uh, thing is a symbolically encoded story that the fire was caused by Hathor. And then you have, of course, Hathor connected to the Dendera temple.
Dendera,
The Dendera temple.
Dendera.
Then you have next coming up here in a few months, you've got the solar eclipse that's going to complete the X over Little Egypt in southern Illinois. And then coming up in a few years, you've got another X being completed over the Dendera temple in Egypt,
Interesting.
Which is Hathor Temple.
which is Hathor's temple. So yeah, there's all kinds of interesting things
Yeah.
with Hathor. And the reason she's connected with the meteor storms that cause the Chicago fire. She has been connected with that for all the way back. I mean, the whole symbology about Hathor is bringing fire out of heaven from that meteor storm.
Wow. I wrote down that Hathor is the goddess of love and protection.
Yeah, but she can change. When she gets angry, she changes and becomes this, she becomes fire out of heaven.
Oh,
Becomes this meteor storm.
I won't
So
say
when
anything.
she's happy, she's one thing, but when she gets angry, she becomes something else.
No comment.
Yep.
All right, the sixth plague, the boils. And Yahuwah said to Moses and Aaron, take handfuls of soot from the kiln and let Moses throw them in the air in the sight of Pharaoh. It shall become fine dust over all the land of Egypt and become boils breaking out in sores on man and beast throughout all the land of Egypt. So they took soot from the kiln and stood before Pharaoh, and Moses threw it in the air, and it became boils breaking out in sores on man and beast. And the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils, for the boils came upon the magicians and upon all Egypt. But Yahuwah hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not listen to him as Yahuwah had spoken to Moses. So the magicians make a return appearance, but of course, they haven't been any of use since plague number 3, but now they can't do anything because being covered in boils, they're now unclean. They can't come before the presence of Pharaoh anyways. So
Isis is the boils is connected to the god Isis. And they found a stele in Egypt, an ancient rock inscription where it's quoting Isis, claiming that she is the rider of Sirius, the star Sirius. And that's where she's saying she's in control of it or superior to it. And of course, Isis was known as the dog star.
Oh.
So there you got again that connection.
I wrote down Isis is the goddess of medicine and peace. Isn't she kind of like the mother god, like the Semiramis type in Egypt? That kind of idea.
Yeah.
Or the Helena in is that would be Roman, I guess.
Yeah, I was looking at what Ward said about Hathor. It totally is exactly that he says. It says motherhood, love, beauty, joy, music, sexuality, but the vengeful, the other side of her, the vengeful protector of Ra. And I'm guessing since Hathor has that dual side, that's probably the same way with this other one.
Yeah.
This dual. And it makes sense because we know that God is a God of love, but when the people disobey, consequences come, and there is like in Isaiah when Yeshua is reading the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, he doesn't finish the rest, which says the vengeful day, the day of vengeance. So yeah.
Yeah, because that prophecy, just that first part of that scripture is be fulfilled at that time. He'll come back later and fulfill the rest of it, but that hasn't happened yet. That is interesting, though, that he would just read that first half because he was fulfilling that portion of it at that time. So things are starting to heat up, boil up, no pun intended. Verse 13, and this is a bit of a longer plague. Then Yahuwah said to Moses, rise up early in the morning and present yourself before Pharaoh and say to him, thus says Yahuwah, the God of the Hebrews, let my people go that they may serve me. For this time I will send all my plagues on you yourself and on your servants and your people, so that you may know that there is none like me in all the earth. For by now I could have put out my hand and struck you and your people with pestilence, and you would have been cut off from the earth. But for this purpose I have raised you up to show you my power, so that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth. So he makes a good point, like, why have these 10 plagues when he could just as easily, put out his hand and just said, that's it, you're done.
So
But
is that the reason why, if he's making this distinction here and he's going to duplicate all these things again, so whenever God is multiplying the plagues in the end, it's for the same reason.
yeah. So he tells them, this is why I'm doing this. It's so that you will know I have raised you up. He's talking to Pharaoh in this. I raised you up, Pharaoh, for this very purpose, to show you my power, that, you and your gods are no match for me. So that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth. And that's the second reason. His name will go out through all the earth. So like you were saying, Mark, like people are hearing about these things. And when we read later in the Torah, when they're in the wilderness, when they get wherever they go, people know what has happened in Egypt. So his name has gone out throughout the world because of all this stuff. You are still exalting yourself against my people and will not let them go. Behold, about this time tomorrow, I will cause very heavy hail to fall, such as never has been in Egypt from the day it was founded until now. Now therefore send, get your livestock and all that you have in the fields into safe shelter, for every man and beast that is in the field and is not brought home will die when the hail falls on them. So if you were a smart Egyptian, that's what you would do. Then whoever feared the word of Yahuwah among the servants of Pharaoh hurried his slaves and his livestock into the houses. So it seems like a number of the Egyptians took heed to this advice. But whoever did not pay attention, and likewise a lot of people didn't, to the word of Yahuwah, left his slaves and livestock in the field. Then Yahuwah said to Moses, stretch out your hand towards heaven, so that there may be hail in all the land of Egypt, on man and beast, and every plant of the field in the land of Egypt. Then Moses stretched out his staff toward heaven, and Yahuwah sent thunder and hail, and fire ran down on the earth. And Yahuwah rained hail upon the land of Egypt. There was hail and fire flashing continually in the midst of the hail, very heavy hail, such as never been in all the land of Egypt, since it became a nation. So it wasn't just hail raining down, it was hail mixed with fire. And that had to be, I would imagine, pretty frightening sight.
The Septuagint says that there was fire flashing in the hail.
In the hail?
In the hail. And it says that the hail crushed the trees in the plain.
Yeah.
So I've watched videos of some baseball size hail falling in Texas, and man, it was just everything in the trees was just being stripped and falling to the ground. It was just, talk about a pummeling sight. And it wasn't long before the ground was a mixture of hail and tree leaves and tree branches, and you look up and the tree is like nearly bare. So it's pretty crazy. And I think what's interesting is these people their homes were built out of stone or earthen, so it would have been fire resistant. The homes today, won't be so lucky.
So this is against the god Nut, who's a female goddess, and she was known as the goddess of the sky, stars, cosmos, mothers, and astronomy. And so why was this against her? Because she supposedly controlled the stuff coming out of the sky. Well, what came out of the sky was a cometary meteor shower. Scientists have I've got a whole presentation on this, but studies just over the last 15 years have discovered that many comets have what's called an ice matrix. What that means is that the ice crystals are like soccer balls. They're hollow on the inside, but they contain methane molecules. So that when these chunks of ice come into the atmosphere and melt, the methane is released and ignites, so that the ice coming down is literally on fire from the burning methane.
Wow.
So this is documented as happening throughout history when these ice fireballs come out of the sky. So this was not just hail from a storm. This was hail coming from a cometary meteor shower.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. That goddess must have been pretty nutty, huh?
Yeah. And she didn't have much control over stopping them.
Yeah, they're praying to her, saying, please stop this, and not a single word coming out of her mouth. But guess what happens? Moses is coming speaking on his God's behalf.
The hail struck down everything that was in the field in all the land of Egypt, both man and beast. And the hail struck down every plant of the field and broke every tree of the field. Only in the land of Goshen, where the people of Israel were, was there no hail. Then Pharaoh sent and called Moses and Aaron and said to them, "This time I have sinned." So this is the first time he's owning up to his sin, even though we know he's been sinning all along. Now he's to the point where he's starting to recognize that he's sinning. Yahuwah is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong. So you think, well, maybe this guy's going to repent or something. Plead with Yahuwah, for there has been enough of God's thunder and hail. I will let you go, and you shall stay no longer. Moses said to him, "As soon as I have gone out of the city, I will stretch out my hands to Yahuwah. The thunder will cease, and there will be no more hail, so that you may know that the earth is Yahuwah's. But as for you and your servants, I know that you do not yet fear Yahuwah Elohim." The flax and the barley were struck down, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was in bud. But the wheat and the emmer were not struck down, for they are late in coming up. So the barley and the bud, this would have been just before Passover, right?
Yeah, and I know people are hunting the barley this month already. They're hunting over there. But I was going to say it in verse 28, he says, "Pray for me to Yahweh and let him put a stop to God's sounds," in the Septuagint. So, you know, this protecting Goshen with the idea of it being a ice storm, because you know whenever these showers come, the Leonoids and the Gemini showers, these come from these passing through the debris of these this ice crystal. It's not being, unlike hail coming from clouds that can be, you know, sparing like a tornado, but these, it's just coming down in one patch. So it really shows that God literally put a hand over that area, because you can't pick and choose with these showers of where it's just coming down, it's pelting everywhere.
Yeah.
That's head first moving through it. So yeah, it would be, this is even more miraculous.
Yeah. Go ahead, Paul.
Not only that, when you think about it, if Moshe's in the city, imagine him walking out, and wherever he's stepping his foot and wherever he's walking, he's not being pummeled by these things, because he's not going to carry some type of metallic umbrella with him. So can you imagine them watching this guy go out, and wherever he's going, there's no hell, there's no problem. And then when he leaves the city, he raises his hand and he asks that, you know, that God would stop like Mark mentioned in the Septuagint, it mentions the sounds, it mentions the hell, and it mentions all these other components. But
it reminds me of a reversal of, you would see a guy walking, it was just a single cloud over his head raining on him. So it's a reversal. It would be like this round area around Moses that nothing's hitting as he's walking. That would be very, very crazy to see.
Moses was like Patton. So Moses went out of the city from Pharaoh and stretched out his hand. I actually thought about that too, Paul. Like walking back is like nothing's hitting him, and he just, you know, because he's not worried. And the rain no longer poured upon the earth. But when Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunder had ceased, he sinned yet again and hardened his heart, he and his servants. So the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, his heart was made heavy, and he did not let the people of Israel go, just as Yahuwah had spoken through Moses. So in this case, this is, I think, one of the only cases where it says Pharaoh himself hardened his heart, because back in verse 27, that's the first time he admitted to sinning, and he's fessing up, saying, "Yeah, your God Yahuwah is correct, and we and my people are wrong." and how soon he just turns from that conviction and just right away hardens his heart. So,
There's an interesting thing here in the Septuagint. In verse 34, it uses the word in the Masoretic, it says hardened in 34 and 35.
uh-huh,
But in the Greek, the first in 34, it means to make heavy, and in 35 is to harden and make stubborn.
yeah,
Two different words meaning two different things. So very interesting. I hadn't noticed that before.
You got to try and think about how many politicians and leaders in world history would be able to stand up to even what's happened so far. I mean,
yeah,
scale of the destruction and the death is mind-boggling. I mean, what nation has had to endure that, I mean, and have the leader stand up to it is pretty rare.
It's almost like God is standing him up like a stick figure to make him keep
yeah.
standing up and refusing so that the plagues can continue. And yeah, that's crazy.
Okay, chapter 10, going into the eighth plague. Then Yahuwah said to Moses, Go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart, made his heart heavy, and the heart of his servants, that I may show these signs of mine among them, and that you may tell in the hearing of your son and of your grandson how I have dealt harshly with the Egyptians, and what signs I have done among them, that you may know that I am Yahuwah. Then Moses and Aaron went into Pharaoh and said to him, Thus says Yahuwah, the God of the Hebrews, How long will you refuse to humble yourself before me? Let my people go, that they may serve me. For if you refuse to let my people go, behold, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your country, and they shall cover the face of the land, so that no one can see the land. And they shall eat what is left to you after the hail, and they shall eat every tree of yours that grows in the field. And they shall fill your houses and the houses of all your servants and of all the Egyptians, as neither your fathers nor your grandfathers have seen from the day they came to earth to this day. Then he turned and went out from Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh's servants said to him, How long shall this man be a snare to us? Let the men go, that they may serve Yahuwah their Elohim. So by this point, the servants are like, they're getting a little frustrated.
So
Do
Mike,
not, go ahead.
so in Mexico, they've got it's down in it's south of Mexico City. There's a mega crazy swarm of this kind of stuff happening that they're calling it. All of the people of Mexico are calling it. Is this the end of the world?
Mhm.
It's the sound is blowing them away. The sight, just everything you see is these things flying. And I'm guessing they're devouring all the crops, but it's happening and they're moving northward. And so, yeah, this is a real big event happening in Mexico currently right now.
Wow.
And here we are, how far out from the Passover?
Yeah. And a mile from Mexico. Uh, okay, where was it? Verse. What verse did I leave off in? And they shall fill your house and all your servants all in.
I
Sorry,
think
Mike.
you're in verse 8.
8. Okay, thank you. So Moses and Aaron were brought back to Pharaoh, and he said to them, Go serve Yahuwah your Elohim. But which ones are to go? So he's trying to negotiate, right? I mean, just can't let them go. Moses said, We will go with our young and our old. We will go with our sons and daughters and with our flocks and herds, for we must hold a feast to Yahuwah. But he said to them, Yahuwah be with you, if ever I let you and your people go. little ones go. Look, you have some evil purpose in mind. No, go, the men among you, and serve Yahuwah, for that is what you are asking. And they were driven out from Pharaoh's presence. So he's just not going to give in. Then Yahuwah said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, so that they may come upon the land of Egypt and eat every plant in the land, all that the hail has left. So Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt. Notice this time it's Moses stretching out his staff, and Yahuwah brought an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. When it was morning, the east wind had brought the locusts. The locusts came up over all the land of Egypt and settled on the whole country of Egypt, such a dense swarm of locusts as had never been before, nor ever will be again. They covered the face of the whole land. It's interesting in the Hebrew, it says the eye of the whole land. So that the land was darkened, and they ate all the plants in the land and all the fruit of the trees that the hail had left. Not a green thing remained, neither tree nor plant of the field.
The Septuagint says, a grasshopper such as this had not occurred before. I wonder if it was an extra large grasshopper than what they'd ever seen before.
Through all the land. Then Pharaoh hastily called Moses and Aaron and said, I have sinned against Yahuwah your God and against you. So that a second time he's confessing sin. Now therefore forgive my sin, please, only this once. And plead, well, he said only this once, I guess that's it, right? The Lord with Yahweh your Elohim, only to remove this death from me. So he went out from Pharaoh and pleaded with Yahuwah, and Yahuwah turned the wind into a very strong west wind, which lifted the locusts and drove them into the Red Sea. Actually, this whole plague here kind of is a picture of the nation of Israel. The word locust is the word arbe. Make sure I got that right. Arbe. And it means multiply, to increase. So that's what these creatures are called. I guess when Adam named them, he said there were a lot of them, so I'll just call them multipliers, arbe. But it's actually the same word found in Genesis 22:17 when Yahuwah tells Abraham, I will multiply your seed. It's the very exact same word, arbe, for multiply.
Wow.
So they come in with a strong east wind. So if you picture when Israel came in to Egypt, they came from the east and they literally multiplied. And now Yahuwah sends a strong west wind to take all these locusts out and dump them into the Red Sea. When Israel leaves, they go out in a westward direction, although they're not tossed into the sea, but the sea opens up so they could pass through the sea. So it's just kind of an interesting correlation there.
Well, and the Septuagint says that the Yahweh turned a violent wind from the sea. It took up the grasshopper, threw it into the Red Sea, and not one grasshopper was left in the whole land. So in other words, this wind had to swoop up every single grasshopper that was there,
yeah,
and swirl it into the air, and then go and plunge it into the Red Sea. I mean, this is just unbelievable. I mean,
a very specific wind.
Yeah, would have had to have been something like maybe like a tornado, how it just grabs everything and just takes it, you know.
So that wind in itself probably did some damage.
Yeah.
That kind of wind. But this is against the god Seth, who is the god of desert, storms, and violence. And
So that's why it says
storms,
violent wind would be going specifically against this violent God. Yeah.
So it's about 8 o'clock, but we're going to read to the end of chapter 10 here, the ninth plague, plague of darkness. Then Yahuwah said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward the heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, a darkness to be felt. So Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was pitch darkness in all the land of Egypt 3 days. They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days, but all the people of Israel had light where they lived. Then Pharaoh called Moses and said, go, serve Yahuwah. Your little ones may go with you, only let your flocks and your herds remain behind. So he's still trying to negotiate. But Moses said, did
So
somebody have a comment?
in the Septuagint, in the for it says, so Moses stretched out his hand toward heaven, and there was darkness, gloom, hurricane. And the Greek word does say hurricane.
Oh, really? Hurricane.
Yeah.
More wind.
That could have been also what could have swept everything off the ground and dumped it into the sea. So if it was the front side of this hurricane that cleaned the land, once the eye passed over and they thought everything was well, then the backside brought the darkness. I mean, something completely blocked out everything.
Yeah.
And yeah.
But Moses said, you must also let us have sacrifices and burnt offerings, that we may offer sacrifices to Yahuwah our Elohim. Our livestock also must go with us. Not a hoof shall be left behind. For we must take of them to serve Yahuwah our Elohim, and we do not know with what we must serve Yahuwah until we arrive there. But Yahuwah hardened Pharaoh's heart. He made his heart strong, and he would not let them go. Then Pharaoh said to him, get away from me. Take care never to see my face again. For on the day you see my face, you shall die. Moses said, as you say, I will not see your face again.
So this is another instance about the Torah hasn't been given, but in verse 25, it says we must go and give an Olah offering at this feast. How do they know that he's requiring an Olah offering at the feast time?
Yeah. That's the burnt offering.
When you read the part about the darkness, did you read the part what it did to the people and the animals? Did you read that verse?
This part,
Isn't there a verse that talks about how the
did
people
not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days.
right, they couldn't move.
Yeah, they were like
So
paralyzed.
why would that be? Well, this is not obviously a normal darkness. Normal darkness is when the sun's not present, so you don't have light in the visible light spectrum, which you
Yeah.
can see with your eyes, and so it's dark. But there's still a vast amount of electromagnetic energy in other frequency ranges, both below and above the visible light spectrum, that are present all the time. But if you take away a very wide range of electromagnetic spectrum, the ambient energy that's always present is going to have a bad physiological effect on your body, because your body, like for instance, your blood vessels uses that, because the blood vessels have molecules that are like antennas, and so do your red blood cells, the cell in the white blood cells, they have antennas that pick up that energy and give them a charge. So the walls of the blood vessels have, like for instance, a negative charge. The blood has a positive charge, so that when it has to squeeze through the little tiny capillaries, I don't know if you've ever seen video of the blood like crunching down and squeezing through the capillaries. What's happening is the opposite charges makes them repel, which reduces friction to zero, and pushes, because their opposite charges repel, it pushes the blood vessel, the blood through the capillaries with low friction. But if you remove that ambient energy, they're going to have massively reduced blood flow, which means they're going to have less oxygen and less functioning, and their whole metabolic rate is going to drop down very low, almost to where they go into a coma. So they're not going to be able to move. So this is why you have these symptoms that is talking about this
Yeah.
darkness that of course they could feel it, and it didn't feel good.
It's interesting you say that because, whenever free radicals are basically incorrectly charged molecules, oxygen molecules. So if that's what's happened, basically their body is full of free radicals of the incorrectly charged oxygen molecules that would totally tank them. Their body would be tanked. I mean, the energy level will go down, and they are so susceptible to sickness and all the other diseases. It would be totally devastating.
Hmm. So I wonder when Moses went back to Pharaoh if there was like light around him, like he was the only one who could see. That would have been interesting. Or I was thinking if they were like there, I mean, I don't know if they could see the light coming from Goshen, or maybe it was just enclosed because apparently there was no light anywhere. And you couldn't even light a fire from it, right? So, uh, we could stop there unless, I was hoping we'd get up to 12, but I guess we'll stop there.
Does anybody have anything to
Any questions, anybody?
add? Questions, comments, thoughts? Quiet group, pause.
Crickets, plague of crickets. Well, we'll stop there, and then next week we'll take up chapter 12. Actually, or 11. I mean, 11 kind of ties into the ninth plague because uh, at the end of chapter 10, when he says, "You'll not see my face again," Moses says, "As you say." But when you go down, it seems like this conversation is continued in 11:4 because Moses is still talking to Pharaoh. So, but there's a little bit of a break between that. But we'll do that next week. So let me close in a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for just the mighty power that you have, Father. And you showed yourself to the Egyptians, and uh, Father, you will show yourself again to this world, Father. Uh, we're just thankful that uh, you have revealed yourself to us, and that we can know who you are through your word. We thank you so much for all that how you have blessed us and given to us and sent your Son to die in our stead. Father, we thank you so much for the reading of your word. And we thank you and pray all these things in Yahushua's name. Amen.